Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You will learn today in lecture 10, Project Risk Management. The lecture outline will show you the importance of a project risk management, and then we'll go through certain processes that related to project risk management. So you can see that we need to start with plan risk management. uh, we have certain common sources of risk on IT projects. Then we follow by second process, which identifying risks. Also, we need to perform qualitative risk analysis as well as quantitative risk analysis. We'll go through the details later. Also, we need to implement the process of planning risk responses. And finally, the sixth one will be controlling risk. So we'll go through each one of them in details, but we will start with the definition of project risk first, followed by project risk management, as you will see from coming slides. Let's start with the definition of a project risk. It is uncertainty that can have negative or positive effect on meeting project objectives. So there are uncertain events or conditions that can happen during the project development, which will have either negative effect or positive effect on the project. So we need to focus on these two terms. We need to minimize the negative effect of the uncertainty event, while we need to enhance the positive effect in that part. So where can I find these uncertain events? I may need to go through the project plan. As you saw during the previous lectures, we have sub-plan that related to scope. So I need to focus on the project scope management plan. I need also to look at the cost plan. Maybe uncertain events can occur. Also, I need to know the schedule plan that's related to such a project. Uh, Beside that, I can go through the project documents. I may find something that's been missed and it can be considered as a threat or risk. Try to categorize it, whether it's a negative or positive, in order to see how to deal with it. Also, I can sit with stakeholders because they can give me new idea, new perspectives that can direct me, guide me to see these uncertain events. So here, as I was saying, that there is no way I will have a project without risk, but I will try to balance or to minimize the negative impact or negative effect and enhance the positive one. So negative will lead to lose, to delay in a project, while positive can give me an opportunity to invest, to increase my sales, to have better recognition. That's how it works with a project risk. We have to live with it and we have to deal with it, and we need to not ignoring it. Let's get started with the project risk management definition. In fact, there are many definitions about this term, but the one in the slide selected from the course textbook. It is the art and science of identifying, analyzing, and responding to risk through the life of a project and in the best interest of meeting project objectives. In fact, the definitions, as you can see, it is related to the previous slide. We said that as long as we will have a project, we will have also a risk associated with. So we need to deal with the risk. We cannot eliminate it, but we can deal with it by identifying it, analyzing, and responding to that risk through the entire life of a project. So starting from the first milestone till we finish the project and submit it, in every milestone or task, we need to deal with that risk. in such a way that we can meet the project objective. So from the definition, you can see that there is a relation between the risk and between the project objectives. Obviously, we will try to achieve the project objective, which means we have to minimize the negative impact of the risk during the development life cycle of that project. Defining the project risk management also will help us to identify the project. So if I'm doing the management in the best way I can as a project manager, it will help me to select the best project. Also, it will help me to identify the scope of the project, develop a realistic schedule. Also, cost estimations will be much better while dealing with the project risk management. Let's take an example for an instance. Now, if you look at Samsung company, when they found an opportunity, which means a positive risk of the project, to enter the market of the smartphone and compete with other companies who are also manufacturing similar product. They found that that product will be much more demandable in the future. So if I'll manufacture thousands of it, I can sell, I can increase my profit, the company will be in better position. But the negative risk to that project was what will happen if I need to manufacture more than thousands per month or per year. As you saw that Samsung sold millions of smartphones around the world. So that threat give them an idea to minimize that negative impact of achieving the project objective, which is increasing the sale and increasing the revenue by uh, expanding the manufacture in other countries such as China and Vietnam. So that can be considered a good case study to help you identifying the positive and as well as the negative of the project risk. So the idea of managing the project risk is all about reducing the negative impact and increasing the positive one. Not only the team who's developing the project will be involved with risk, no, all stakeholders will be involved. So defining the project risk management will help all stakeholders to understand the nature of the project and emphasize on the weakness as well as the strengths of the project. Now, the issue here that we need to focus about is the point available in this slide. Good project risk management often goes unnoticed. So it is not like a crisis management, which indicates an obvious danger to the success of the project. No, it will come suddenly. That's why it needs a good preparation, a good plan in order to predict and identify as well as analyze the risk that can happen in the project and prepare a good response to each one, as I said, during the life of the project development. Let's continue with the importance of a project risk management. Organizational individuals should strive to balance between risk and opportunities. So, organizational can try to balance between risks and opportunities. So, project management body of knowledge identify two different attitudes: risk appetite and risk tolerance. So these two, we will try through these two attitudes to balance between risk as well as opportunities. Risk appetite focus more towards the opportunities. Let's go through the definition. Risk appetite is the degree of uncertainty an entity is willing to take in anticipations of reward. So, uh, entity, individual, company can go through that project because they want the reward. They want maybe the bigger profit from implementing that project. Maybe they want to be recognized and so on. While risk tolerance is the maximum acceptable level that an entity can have of risks while doing the project, which means as a company, as an individual, I have to draw a red line. That red line will show me the maximum level that I shouldn't exceed while doing the project. So if I want to do it, I should do it within that level that my company, myself can handle. So the body management of knowledge identify these two attitudes in order to balance between the risk appetite as well as the risk tolerance. A project may get accepted if the risk within the tolerance are in balance with the rewards. So if, as a company, if I can find a project which will give me quite good rewards as well as, or in the same time, the tolerance of risk, it is okay, I am safe, I can reach that level of risk, why not? I may go through the project and accept it. To make it easier for you to understand, we can take a real life case study. Petronas, which is the oil company in Malaysia, accepted to construct or to supply the money in order to construct the twin towers that it is already there in Malaysia and in Kuala Lumpur. And when they did it, they had the risk appetite, which means the rewards was quite good in terms of money and in terms of also anticipation. As you know, that these twin towers is the highest among the region, and the opportunity was quite good to be accepted, which they did it. While constructing these twin towers, a fire had been done in one of these towers, and it make the constructors of the workers to feel let's say afraid, and it was a risky situation, so they ran away and climb higher levels just trying to avoid such fire. Luckily, authority managed to control it and shut it down. And also at that time, they learned the lesson. They said that it is better also to balance. So we need to consider the risk tolerance. And because of that, they constructed a bridge between the two towers. Because if something wrong or bad happened to one of these towers, the people inside that tower can climb the bridge and run to the other tower. So that's the balance that Petronas company managed to find in order to achieve that big project. Let's continue with the definition of risk utility. Risk utility is the amount of satisfaction or pleasure received from potential payoff. Risk utility means what will be the benefit, what will be the reaction of accepting such a risk and doing certain project. So they said that it can be measured by the satisfaction or pleasure received from the return back, the revenue, the successful of completing the project. Here we can identify organizations or individuals into three categories: risk seekers, risk averse, and risk neutral. Risk seekers is the one that will have a big risk appetite, meaning that in terms of tolerance, the red line that I mentioned in the previous slide, it is higher. So they are willing to accept higher risk comparing to the second category, risk averse. Risk averse means those who are willing to accept lower level of risk tolerance. So they will not go for higher risk, which is opposite to the risk seekers. While risk neutral is the balance between them. So they have a higher level comparing to risk averse, while it is lower comparing to risk seekers. Let's take an example from your textbook. Now, let's assume that three different companies from three different categories want to purchase a new hardware product from a vendor who have been not in the market for a certain while. It's not that famous since a long time ago. So for risk averse company, they will not do it because they are afraid that the product itself is not that good, and maybe it will not work properly, maybe it will fail, so they don't have that risk tolerance to accept it, so they will not purchase that product from that certain vendor. While risk seekers, they'll do it because they want to take the opportunity to try that new hardware, and they will be the first to do it, and maybe the benefit will goes only to them. As I said, risk seekers, they are accepting higher level of risk tolerance. Risk neutral, they might go for certain number of meetings and analysis before they decide whether to purchase or not that piece of hardware from that certain vendor. So I hope that it will be clear for you to understand the term of risk utility and the categories of risk available in your even textbook with certain illustrated graph. Now, speaking about a graph, we can see that we have a figure from chapter 11 in your textbook showing that a good manager should focus on the project risk management in the milestone of the planning as well as monitoring and controlling. And as you can see from the figure, the project manager will allocate 5 important processes in a planning, while allocate 1 process in the milestone of monitoring and controlling. Of course, we'll go through it in more details in the coming slides, but just to brief you about it, that if you start with the plan risk management, obviously we need a plan to handle that risk or to manage it. So the output will be the actual plan that it will be ready to be used. While identifying risks lead to risk register, performing qualitative as well as a quantitative risk analysis lead to project document updates, and plan risk response lead to project management plan update as well as project documenting or documentations updating. The last one, called control risk, that one will make some change in the project request, in updating the management plan as well as project document updates. Also, no need to forget, we need to focus on the organizational process assets, which will be updated also based on implementing the control risk process. Let's start with the first process, which is planning risk management. As you saw in the previous slide, the output should be the risk management plan, as it is clear here in this slide. So what we can do in this process? In this process, the developer team should decide how to approach risk management activities and plan for them in the project. That decision can be taken after several meetings that that team should implement during the earliest life cycle of the project. During these meetings, the team should review project documents, risk management policies, risk categories, lesson learned reports from past projects, and the team should prepare a template for creating risk management plan. It is also important to review risk tolerance for different stakeholders. As you remember, we explained that we have different categories of organizations, of people, so the stakeholders also can be categorized into the 3 categories. So we may have a risk averse, we may have a risk seeker, we may have a risk neutral, and so on. So it's important for the team to review all these, let's say, documents, informations, facts, before they will go through the uh, writing of risk management plan. And that's why I mentioned that they need a template, because during the several meetings they may update, they may change, they may rewrite it. So as you can see here in the slides, the risk management plan will document the procedure for managing risk through the project. Table 11.2 in your next slide from the textbook will show you that risk management should address different general topics, and each topic will try to explain it and showing you in better way. Let's continue with the topic addressed in risk management plan. As you can see here, we have 8 topics, and each one will be considered with related questions. In fact, this slide remind me about a lecture and a topic you study in lecture 2, which is the three sphere of system, if you remember it, where certain questions related to certain sphere of the system. These three spheres was business, organizations, and technology. Here we have a bit similar approach. So we have more than 3. In fact, we have 8, as I said, and each one of them having related questions. For instance, methodology, here we will have 2 questions. How will risk management be performed on this project? That's the first question. And the second one, what tools and data sources are available and applicable? The developer team, during the meetings I mentioned in the previous slide, should answer all these questions, and the information that they can get from answering all these questions will help in creating the template of the risk management plan. In addition to prepare plan for risk management, many projects will have other plans, which are contingency plan, fallback plan, contingency reserves. Let's take it one by one. We'll go through the first one, contingency plan. It is a predefined action that a project team will take if an identified risk event occurs. Actually, the term contingency plan, it is equivalent to emergency plan, so you can use a similar term to indicate such a plan. But let's understand that a plan by giving an example. So if the project team knows that the new release of a software package may not be available in time, the team might have a contingency plan or emergency plan to use the existing older copy of that software. So it means here that if I'm developing a new copy, a new version of certain software, let's say Windows, and the team realized that we cannot provide the new copy of that software on time, we may use temporary the existing one until we can complete all the remaining let's say parts of the software, and then we can release that one. So I hope that it is clear for you to understand the contingency plan or emergency plan. While for the fallback plan, it is developed for risks that have a high impact on meeting project objectives and are implemented if attempts to reduce the risk are not effective. I can simplify that plan to you by saying a simple example. Now, let's say that I'm trying to do a new project. So I need to have a plan for that project. So they are saying when it comes to risk, it is better to have a fallback plan, or in another term, to have copy A plan and copy B plan. So if the copy A plan didn't work, at least I still have copy B to be used. While the last one, which called contingency reserves, are a provision held by the project sponsor or organization to reduce risk of cost or schedule overruns to acceptable level. So as you can see from the definition of that contingency reserves, it means that I, as a sponsor, or I, as an organization, should hold an extra money for me in order to use it if such risk level happen. And to make it clear for you here, let's assume that a company accepted a new project to be implemented using a new technology that their staff, their team developer members, they don't have that much of experience. In fact, they mention it in their risky plan. So when it comes to implementing and using and training as well to their real users, they might not be effective or experienced enough. So the sponsor or organization might use that extra money to hire a consultant, a well-experienced person, to train the staff of using that technology, or even train the real users how to deal with that software. Several studies showed that IT projects share several common sources of risks. As you can see here, we have lack of user involvement, lack of executive management support, any clear statements of requirements, poor planning, lack of realistic expectation, smaller project milestones, competent staff and ownership, and finally, lack of hardworking and focused staff. So these criterions will indicate the common sources that can be shared by many IT projects. In fact, in your textbook, they developed an IT success potential scoring sheet which will help them to minimize the negative impact of such common sources of risks. So if we take the first one, for instance, lack of user involvement. So in the table here, that point scored 19. So these 19 came from answering 5 questions related to user involvement. I can read it from the textbook to you, and then we'll explain about it. Do I have the right users? Did I involve the user early and often? Do I have a quality relationship with the users? Do I make environment easy? Did I find out what the user needs? So here, the project manager tried to answer these questions individually. For each positive answer, the project manager can achieve 3.8 points, because if you multiply the 3.8 of positive answer by 5 questions related to user involvement, you will get 19. That's why in the table, user involvement scored 19, while lack of executive management support here scored 16, and so on. As I said, you can refer back to your book for more information. But let's speak about the questions here. These questions that been asked and need an answer from the project manager in order to calculate the success rate or score in the common source of risks in IT. A project shouldn't be the same all over the projects, meaning that I will not ask the same questions from one project to another, but as a project manager, as a company, I can develop my own questions and then try to answer it and see how the score will be. Here, to do such a set of questions in that approach, I need to consider 2 issues. The total of a score should reflect to 100. That's clear. So whatever points I can get from the, let's say, common sources mentioned in the slide, at the end, the total of it is 100. That's number one. Number two, when I'm designing such a questions like that, I should stick to the standard advice done by board categories of risks, which described the questions that might include the following categories. My questions should relate it to market risk, to financial risk, to technology risk, to people risk, and finally structure or process risk. So the details of the questions, I can change it, but the 5 categories that I mentioned to you should be there. So my questions should cover the 5 categories, not necessary to each common source, but at least it covers through all the common sources. And at the end, when I calculate the success sheet, it shouldn't exceed 100 points. We're still continuing with common source of risk on IT projects. We can use another method to understand the common sources of risk on IT projects. Review the work breakdown, the one that we studied before, work breakdown structure for a project to see if there might be a specific risks by WBS categories. Let's take general example. If an item on the WBS involves preparing a press release معناه بالعربي خبر صحفي, and no one on the project team has ever written one, it could be a negative risk if the release is not handled professionally. Here they are talking about a team in media where they try to write a press release. You know, not every journalist can do it. It needs a special experience, special, let's say, training to handle it properly. For instance, if they wrote it in a poor grammar way, it won't give the right meaning. So here they are saying that such situation like that can generate a negative risk. So we need to be careful. So how can I reduce that negative impact? I may use the WBS category. In fact, breakdown structure is a useful tool to help project manager consider potential risks in different categories, and it works similar in form to of working work breakdown or WBS structure. So as I will show you in the next slide, there is an example showing you the WBS that can be let's say handled in such situation. Let's take an example here. As you can see from your textbook, figure 11.4 shows a sample risk breakdown structure. Such a structure here might apply to many IT projects. That's why they indicated at the top. While highest level categories of risks will include business, technical, organizational, project management. Under business risk, you may find competitors, suppliers, cash flow, while in technical risk, you can find hardware, software, and network. Let's break down hardware furthermore to indicate the potential risks available. So, hardware could be broken down further to include malfunctions, meaning that the instrument, the hardware itself is not working for whatever reasons. So that's a risk. Availability, whether it is available on time or not, that's also another risk. And also cost. So if I create it and it is working, yet it is expensive, I may have a risk of selling it or distributing it to users. So in this way, project manager can break down furthermore the related milestones or points under the highest category of the 4 risks available in this sample. In addition, to identify risk based on the nature of the project or the nature of the product created. It's also important to identify potential risks according to project management knowledge, such as scope, time, cost, quality, and so on. So I will show you in the next slide, inshallah, that we will have these points represented in certain table which will make it easy for you to understand. As I mentioned in the previous slide, using work breakdown structure will help you to identify potential negative risks associated with knowledge area, such as scope, time, cost, quality, and so on. And in this table available in the slide, it is showing you the knowledge area as well as the risk conditions associated with. I may go, for example, with the scope, so we can see that poor definition of the scope, incomplete definition will raise the risks of project failure. We mentioned about it in the lecture previously. We said that in the scope, try to focus on what to do and what to cover, what are the things that you will not do, that you will not cover, so it will be clear to all stakeholders, rather than during the process of developing, you will find somebody will say, no, I want this, I want that, why did you include that? So that's an important to avoid such a risk condition, try to make it clear. Also, for an instance, we will have inequality, poor attitude towards quality. They are not focusing towards it. They are not doing the standard steps that we mentioned previously in the slides, substandard design, materials, and so on. So these things you try to make it properly in order to avoid the risk conditions associated with it. It's important in the stakeholders that you try to avoid the lack of consultations with the key stakeholder. You try to see, for example, I'm having a system that will be used by the user, so I need to consider how the user will handle that one. I need to focus with it. So I need more consultation with the user, as well as maybe the supplier who will pay for the money, in order to be clear on the duration and the cost that will be covered in the project development. Let's get started with the second process, which is called identifying risk. It is the process of understanding what potential events might hurt, negative effect, or enhance positive effect a particular project. In fact, there are several techniques that we can use to identify risk in order to manage it later. But there are four common techniques to identify certain risks. Number one, brainstorming. Number two, the Delphi technique. Number three, interviewing. And number four, root cause analysis. If we start with the brainstorming, it's a group of developers attempts to generate idea or find solutions for a specific problem by amassing idea and without judgment. Massing idea ترجمتها بالعربي هي تجميع الأفكار أو تكديس الأفكار. So here in this technique, the group of people will attempt to collect and generate a comprehensive list of risks. These risks will be addressed later during the process of qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. So that technique can be used in identifying risk, and it can help other processes, as I mentioned, qualitative as well as quantitative risk analysis later. Second approach, called the Delphi technique, which drive consensus among panel of experts who make prediction about future development. The term consensus ترجمتها بالعربي معناها الإجماع، كأنه البانل أو مجموعة الأشخاص مجتمعين أو متوافقين على فكرة معينة. So here, if we can try to explain more about this technique, we can use an example here. Let's assume that an employee working in a certain company branch want to use that technique to help him understanding why his company is no longer winning any contracts. So the branch of that company is not doing well, and let's say one employee want to understand why by using such technique. So simply that employee could assemble a panel of people with the knowledge in his business area, and each one of these expert people would answer questions related to the company situation. And then their answers will be evaluated in order to understand the reasons. Third approach is about interviewing. So here, interviewing is a fact-finding technique for collecting information in face-to-face or phone or email or instant messaging discussions. Now, if you remember from the previous lecture, such communication channels as face-to-face communication or phone, email, instant messages will really help to exchange ideas and then get a positive agreement while doing the project. That was in the previous lecture, communication management. But now if I'm speaking about identifying risk technique, that interview can be actually used to identify risk using these similar approaches. For example, if a new project involves using particular type of hardware or software, people who had recent experience with that hardware or software could describe the problems on past projects. So using face-to-face meeting or phone calling, email, and so on will help to exchange these ideas and to share the experience in such a way that they will avoid the problems that these people faced previously. So interviewing will help to identify this before we are getting it. The last one is root cause analysis, which is result in identifying even more potential risks for a project. So all these common techniques and other techniques can help a developer company to identify the risks, list them down, and then try to find a way to respond to that risk or to these risks, which we will find it later. Let us recall some information we explain it in lecture uh, 10 in slide number 6, which is the output of identifying risks process. The output should be risk register. What is risk register? Risk register is a document that contains results of various risk management process. So it is a file, a document, will contain the results from managing these risks, and that output, risk register output, can be achieved by having list of identifying risk, which we can get it by using one of the 4 common techniques to identify risks, plus other information needed. So we'll try to explain furthermore and exercise one example in the following slide, inshallah. Let us remember that risk register is the output of risk identify process. And we said that it is a document which will be displayed normally as a table, as you can see in table 11.5, or separate sheet. So this is an example of risk register which we have here in this table columns starting with number, rank, risk, description, category, and so on. So let's take one of them. For instance, R44 will be the one. So in the number they wrote R44. The rank of that register is 1. Risk is a new customer. So we have a new customer in the system. That's why they put the rank as this way. The description here: we have never done a project for this organization before, and we don't know too much about them. So the company is trying to do a project to certain organization, but they consider them as a new customer since they didn't do any project previously. One of our company's strength is building good customer relationship, which is often leads to further projects with the customer. We might have trouble working with this customer because they are new to us. So one strange thing about the company here who's developing projects for other organizations, they have the ability to create a good relationship with customers in such a way that they will continue developing other projects in the future. But their situation now is, since it is a new company for them, a new organization for them, that's why they are struggling to establish that relationship. So they consider it as a risk. The category to that risk is people risk, since they want to establish relationship and communicate with the employee or people in the other company. That can be considered as a people risk category. Root cause: we went in a contract to work on a project without really getting to know the customer. So somehow the company managed to win that contract, and they have to develop a product or a project to the other institute or organization. But again, as we mentioned here, they don't know the customer, they don't know the people there. That's why they are a bit afraid, and that's why they consider it a risk. Certain trigger is there in the column of triggers, that the project manager and other senior managers realize that we don't know much about the customer and could easily misunderstand their needs or expectation. In fact, they are trying to predict or make an idea of who are the people, how they can think, how we can estimate their expectation, and so on. So project manager, other senior managers, they realize that fact that they cannot build such information since they have no experience or history to deal with that company or organization. In the column of potential response, make sure the project manager is sensitive to the fact that is a new customer and take the time to understand them. Have the project manager or PM set up a meeting to get to know the customer and clarify their expectation. So in the potential response, they told or they informed the project manager to take his time in order to understand the other organization, the other people in the other company, and clarify their expectation in clear manner in such a way that we will not misunderstand them. We will be clear to them, they will be clear to us, so that the project will work smoothly. We have here a column called risk owner. So risk owner related to project manager, because he's the one who will assemble the team of the project, who will lead the project till the end. So this person, project manager, is the one who will own that risk and is the one to respond to it. The probability column consider that risk medium while the impact is high. So the status, the PM, project manager, will set up the meeting within the week. Because they don't know the other people, the other company, they need to meet them as soon as possible. So project manager need to make the meeting within this week in order to know more details, to understand their expectations, to arrange the things smoothly. Now we will go through new process which called the performing qualitative risk analysis process. As you can remember, we already identify risks and we got our output, which was the risk register. Now we need to classify these risks in order to know who has the highest priority. So we put it at the top, followed by second priority, third priority, and so on. Why we need to do that? we need to focus on them in order to minimize their negative effect on the project and to achieve our objectives in a smooth way. How to perform such analysis like that? We have a couple of tools that will help us to perform qualitative risk analysis. The first one called probability impact matrix. This one I will explain about it later in the coming slide, inshallah. But from its name, you can see that it is a matrix, a table that will have an impact in the x-axis and probability in the y-axis, and then we can classify the risks which been identified based on three categories: high, medium, low. The second tool called top 10 risk item tracking technique, that one also it is a table as I will show you in the coming slide, and that table will keep a track about the top risk identified, and they will do continuous review with the project management, with the customers, to continuously reviewing these ranking and keep track about them in order to have the priority and focus on them. So we will see in the table that they will study them monthly and see each month which rank, which number they will have. So they need to track them for the entire phases or milestones of the project. As we said in the previous slide, probability impact matrix can help us to perform qualitative risk analysis. So as you can see here from the slide, it is a matrix or a table which we will have probability in the y-axis and impact in the x-axis. Also, we can classify these risks. For instance, we have about 12 risks here distributed in this matrix between probability and impact factors or excesses. And as you can see that if we go through risk 1, risk 4, we can see that they are high in a probability as well as in impact. So the risk 1 and risk 4 need more potential attention from the developer team. While if we look at risk number 9, we can see that although it is high in a probability, it is yet medium in the impact. And risk number 6, it's high in probability but low in impact. So in this way, I can classify my risks in such a way I'll focus on top high risks if it match in both probability and impact, and reduce my potential focusing on others who might come medium or low in probability and impact. So from the example, we don't have low and low, but as I said, we have high and high, which occurs in risk 1 and risk number 4. The rest of risks are distributed somewhere. For example, risk 2, it is medium in both, similar to risk number 5, risk number 11, while although in a probability risk number 8 is low, but it is medium in the impact. So different risks with different classification will help project management team developers to keep their attentions to the high risk in terms of probability as well as impact. This is an example of top 10 risk item tracking. Here they focus on top 5 risk events. And as I told you in the previous slide, it is a table which will have multiple columns to keep track about the risks event and the action need to be taken in order to minimize the negative impact on achieving project objectives. So as you can see, we have rank this month, rank last month, number of months in top 10. So if I have a project duration of, let's say, 6 months or 1 year, 12 months, so these five being tracked in the last few months, as you can see here, the risk event, which called inadequate planning or poor planning, was top 10 for the last 4 months, while poor identification was for top 10 for 3 months, and so on. So if we speak about the current month, poor planning will host the number one, while poor time estimates will be in number five. Now, as I was saying, we have a column to indicate the action that should be taken to reduce the negative impact. So for poor planning, we have here working on revising the entire project management plan. Because we have a weaker plan, we have poorer plan, so a risk can be potentially high to be occur. That's why the reaction should be like that. While if I speak about poor time estimates number five, they will revise the schedule estimates in order to improve it and to minimize such a risk. As I was saying in the beginning, we cannot eliminate, but we can minimize the negative impact of these risks. So this example is providing the usage of top 10 risk item tracking, which will be tracked by the beginning of phases or milestones from the planning till submitting the project, till the end of the project. Performing quantitative risk analysis is the process number 4, which will be implemented in planning phase. The output of this process is project document update. To implement quantitative risk analysis, we can use different techniques. Here we have 3 techniques. Number 1, data gathering. Number 2, analysis and modeling techniques. Number 3, expert judgment. We'll focus on the second technique, which is analysis and modeling, because it has further techniques, which are decision tree analysis, simulation, sensitivity analysis. Normally, when we have a project, we can use one of these 3, but how we can decide which one we can use? Actually, there are certain factors will affect on our selection to choose whether to use decision tree, simulation, or sensitivity analysis. These factors are the nature of a project, availability of time, and money. These 3 factors can affect on our selection. In coming slides, we'll go in details with decision tree analysis, simulations, and sensitivity analysis. Remember, analysis and modeling techniques are using further techniques. Decision tree is the first one. Decision tree definition, actually it's a diagramming analysis technique which is used to help select the best course of action when future outcomes are uncertain. So I can use decision tree when the output, the outcomes, it's not clear, it's uncertain. So it will help me because it is a diagram that will show me the best course of action. So I have different let's say courses, and I can choose the best among them in order to predict the future outcomes. Then here we cannot use decision tree alone because I have to use also what they call it expected monetary value. expected monetary value معناها القيمة النقدية المتوقعة. So I will be using both together in order to perform the quantitative risk analysis in better way. Expected monetary value, or EVM shortly, use decision tree analysis to evaluate the potential projects based on their expected value. So here After I draw the decision tree, I'll be using the EVM in order to decide whether to choose or not to choose the projects that I have in my company. How we can do like that? Actually, EVM need a certain formula to be implemented on all courses that I already drawed in decision tree. Then based on that calculation, I can decide whether to accept or reject the projects. Let's take an example. Suppose a certain company or branch firm was trying to decide if it should submit a proposal of a project 1, 2, both or neither project. So here in this example, they are trying to tell you the scenario that I have a project developing company or firm, and that firm branch want to decide whether to accept both projects, project 1 and 2, or to reject both. How can we do something like that? As I said, we need first to do the diagram, apply a decision tree first, then implement EVM calculation formula in order to decide whether to go for both the projects or not. And that I will explain it furthermore in coming slide, inshallah. Let's continue with our example from the previous slide. As you remember that we have a certain firm of developing projects, and they want to decide whether to accept both of projects 1 and 2 or reject them. So in order to decide, they have to use a certain technique, and they decided to go for decision tree. So first I need to draw the decision tree, and as you can see here from the figure, you need to start with default value, which called decision. So decision, our default point to start with the tree diagram. Then we need to know how many projects in our example. We have 2, so I'll draw both of them. If I have 1, I'll draw only 1. If I have more than 2, then I'll draw more than 1 or 2 projects. So here, one line go for project 1, as you can see, one other line go for project 2. In project 1, it's also need to be splitted into 2 parts, 2 probabilities. The probabilities here will have 2 options. One, it will happen and lead to profit. That's why you can see at the end the 60,000 will be plus, or 80%, the other one, will lead to a lose or it will cost the firm branch with minus 32,000. So in a project 1, 20% will lead to accept the project and having some certain positive earning. So how can I can get this 60,000? You need to implement expected monetary value or EMV formula. The formula says you have to multiply the probability times multiply outcome or impacts in other references or resources. So you can see that 20% or 20 divided by 100 multiplied by 300,000 will be equal to positive 60,000. The other probability, which will make, as I said, the company lose, 80% will be multiplied by negative, so it will cost the company negative 40,000. So here, if you multiply them, you will get negative 32,000. It's not done yet. In order to decide or not, and remember, they have to decide for both or reject for both. So let's see the first one. EMV here, final value for it, you should add both. You should add the 20% probability, which, as we said, it will lead to positive 60,000, plus 80% probability, which lead to minus 32,000. So here, because of the different sign value, subtraction operation will be there, and the final answer is 28,000 for project 1 only. If we go to project 2, I can see that I have more than 2 probabilities. It's different from project 1. Project 1 had only 2 probabilities. Now I have 3. First one with the 20%, but it will lead to lose, as you can see, minus 50,000. So if I multiply both, I can get minus 10,000. another 10% of P or probability will lead also to another lose in this project. So you multiply 10% or 10 divided by 100 by minus 20,000. It is equal to minus 2,000. And the last one, 70% will lead to an earn or profit with 60,000. So you multiply 70% by 60,000, it will be equal to 42,000. Again, I have to add these final answers in order to get the grand total. So minus 10,000 plus minus 2,000 plus positive 42,000 will be equal to 30,000. So from the result here, from the final results of project 1 and project 2, the branch of firm company can decide to go for it, to accept it, because both will lead to a positive number in the EMV, in expected monetary value, واللي هي مثل ما خبرناكم القيمة النقدية المتوقعة. So here I can get positive figure, so why not, let's go for projects. Now, one important note you need to consider when it comes to probability, whether in project 1 or project 2, the total of probability should be equal to 1 or 100. If you see here 20 plus 80, it is a 100 divided by 100, so it's equal to 1. It shouldn't exceed that number or become below. So in the second project, the same scenario here. If you add 20 plus 10 plus 70, you will get 100, which will be divided by 100 will give you also 1. Now, if you want to go for further examples, I will upload inshallah extra examples about calculation of EMV. So kindly I'm requesting you to go through it, read it, go through it. It's actually a solved examples just to make it easy for you to understand. And also I will upload extra questions. I want you to solve it, try to solve it. Some of it related to MCQ, so certain questions related to EMV, will be from the MCQ question, and also short answer question when we'll give you a scenario and ask you to find the expected monetary value. So please try to practice and exercise in order to improve your knowledge in this topic. The second technique of modeling and analysis is called simulation. Simulation معناها المحاكاة. We have quite famous simulation model or technique is called Monte Carlo simulation. It simulates a model outcome many times to provide statistical distribution of the calculated results. So I need to use certain calculation and get results by doing what? By running the simulations many times. And these results will be distributed statistically, so implement certain tools in statistical in order to show me the big picture and show me what to do in next step. What is the benefit of using Monte Carlo simulation? It can give me the prediction probability of finishing the project by a certain date. So it can predict, if I start from today, it can predict for me the probability of finishing my project based on the plan, based on the project document, based on the calculation I mentioned before, whether I can meet my due date of finishing the project or not. That's one point. Or it can predict the probability that the cost will be equal to or less than certain value. Now that certain value, let me simplify it for you. Let's assume that certain value is the cost of the product I'm spending on certain product that I will develop in this project. Now, if that product, when I'll sell it in a certain price, I'm expecting certain profit from it. So before I'll start doing that product, developing that product, Monte Carlo simulation can help me to predict the probability whether that product cost will be equal or less than a certain value that I'm having in my mind. And in a brief, let's assume that I'm having in my mind that I will sell certain product after developing it with $90. So before I'll go through it and implement the plan, do the programming, coding, testing, I need to know whether it's worthy or not, whether I can sell it in that figure or not. So Monte Carlo simulations will help me to achieve it. There are 5 basic steps of Monte Carlo analysis that I will explain in the coming slides. Started with the 5 steps in Monte Carlo simulation. Step number 1, assess the range for the variable being considered. Here I need to assess or evaluate the variables that I consider it, the variables that it will be in the simulation, it will be in the calculation. An example here, if you are trying to determine the likelihood, the possibility of meeting project schedule goals, the project network diagram will be your model. So if I want to check whether I can meet the goals, the objectives of the project schedule, I may use the project network diagram here. Second point, determine the probability distribution of each variable. In point number 1, we evaluated the variables that we considered. Now we need to determine the probability distribution for each variable that we already determined in step number 1. So here, if an expert assigned to a particular task provides a most likely estimate of 10 weeks, an optimistic estimate is 8 weeks, a pessimistic estimate of 12 weeks. Here they are giving you an example. They said that an expert being given to a particular task to be done. That task might take 10 weeks to finish. That's the most likely, that's the expected. If I'm optimistic, optimistic means متفائل, I can finish it in shorter than 10 weeks. I can finish it in 8. While if I'm pessimistic, متشائم, so I'll do it in more than 10 weeks. I'll do it in 12. So here, you then ask about the probability of completing that task between most likely and the optimistics, between 10 will 12 weeks. We don't want to be pessimistic, we don't want to delay the project. So I'll try to calculate the probability, how many percent I can have to finish my project between by the end of week 8 or by the end of week 10. And here Monte Carlo simulations will help me to calculate. They said here that the expert will go for 20% probably. Of course, these factors, most likely, optimistic, pessimistic, we study it in PERT model, but it is an example that showing you how Monte Carlo simulations is working. We are still in Monte Carlo simulations. We reach now step number 3. For each variable, such as time estimates for a task, select random value based on the probability distributions for the occurrence of the variable. So in this step, I need to select random value for a certain variable. Here they took time estimations. If you recall from previous slide in step number 2, they took a task being assigned to an employee in a company, asking him to finish. So most likely that task can be finished in 10 weeks. Optimistically can finish in 8 weeks. Pessimistically can be finished in 12 weeks. Here we can have a 20%, as we said, of making that task finish between week 8 and week 10. So any value between 8 and 10 will be counted as the 20%. So when I run the model, if I can take week 8, week 9, week 10, it is still from the 20%. So anyone randomly can be considered there. While and the same time I have to run it for the remaining 80%. So that means if I have the task being finished between more than week 10 till week 15, let's say week 11, week 12, week 13, week 14, week 15, it will still be counted as the probability of the 80%. So I need to run that model twice, once for the 20%, once for the 80%. While in step number 4, we need to run a deterministic analysis or one pass through the model using the combinations of values selected for each variable. Now let's remember that in step number 3, we got random values by implementing the 20%, whatever value I got from the first run, and then also I did again first run of 80% and I selected random value. Here they said that we can use these selected random values in order to run deterministic analysis, or what they call it one pass through model. So as an example, they are saying one task described in the preceding scenario might have the value of 12 on the first run. So they said when we run 80%, for instance, we got week 12. So the task can be finished in week 12. So I can use it. So they're saying that you have to implement these combinations values of happening in certain percent, or delaying in another certain percent. We said 8 and 10, 20. More than 10 and 15, it's an 80. So we have to implement it for only one variable, which called time estimated. I have to implement such random values for the other selected variables that we already mentioned in step number 1. And no need to move for the second page, because the second slide is just showing you step number 5. Step number 5, actually, it is a repetition of step number 3 and step number 4 many times. Why? To obtain the probability distributions of the model's result. So here I have to run step number 3 multiple times, which means from first time I have to select random value for both percentages. For step number 4, again, I have to run it and have the combinations of these values to run deterministic analysis. And I keep repeating it many times because I need to obtain the probability distributions of the results. Remember that Monte Carlo simulations will give you the statistical distributions of the calculated results. So I'm calculating these results in the steps that we mentioned from 1 to 4. In 5, I'll keep repeating 3 and 4 only in order to have multiple values that will help me to obtain the probability distribution. Sensitivity analysis is the third technique in analysis and modeling. It's used to see the effect of changing one or more variables on an outcome. So I can use it to see any effect of changing for one variable or more on the output, on the outcome. I can give you an example later. Many professionals use it to help make several common business decisions. Separate sheet software can help in performing sensitivity analysis. An example here, I can use that technique to determine the monthly payment for a loan given different interest rate or period of time. Now let's see here. I have a loan. That loan, it's not simple, it's compound. Compound means that the interest rate will be different. So the monthly payment also will be different. So the first year, let's say if it's a 10%, then the second year it will be 110, say third year will be 120, and so on. So based on the different combination of the interest rate, the monthly payment will be different. So I need such model to help me to see the effect of the change when I'm changing the variable, which is the interest of the loan. What will be the outcome as an effect? That can help. Also, if the period time of the loan will be different. Some banks, when you take a loan from it, it will stop taking that monthly payment during holidays or Eid. So during Eid al-Adha, during Eid al-Fitr, maybe they will cut it, they will stop it temporarily, and then after that they will continue taking the monthly payment. So also I need to understand that change, how it will affect the outcome. how long it will take, for example, for a person who's every year twice they'll cut taking that monthly payment, how long it will take him to pay that loan to the bank. In fact, by ending this slide, we finish all the techniques that related to analysis and modeling. Now, I mentioned it to you that which one of these three I can use, such as decision tree, simulations, sensitivity analysis. I mentioned it to you before that there are certain factors will affect on the selection, such as the nature of the project, what type of a project I'm doing. That's one part that it can affect on choosing which technique model. Also, how long it will take to finish the project. Is it number of months? Is it number of years? And the budget, how much money they allocated to that project. These factors can affect while I'm selecting which technique to be used in order to perform quantitative risk analysis. So by that, we are done with the quantitative risk analysis process, yet we still have one more process from the planning phase that we will take it in the next slide, inshallah. Let's start with the fifth process, which called the planning risk response. It is the fifth one in project planning. The expected output of implementing a planning risk response is to update project management plan and project documentation. So it involves developing options and defining strategies for reducing negative risks, the one that will affect on achieving our objectives of project, and enhancing the positive risks that will enhance achieving the objectives of our projects. How we can implement it? As we mentioned, there are different strategies. One of them here, we have actually four. Let's start with the first: risk avoidance, تجنب المخاطر. So we will try to avoid the risk, eliminating specific threat, usually by eliminating its cause. Now, I have a laptop and I have so many files that in such a way my hard disk is not enough. So I was thinking of buying a new portable hard disk. Now, I may afraid that the portable hard disk device or hardware will be broken, will not work properly, will have some problem. So it is better to delete unnecessary files from my hard disk to, let's say, increase the hard disk capacity in my laptop. So that's a way to avoid problems, to avoid risk. That's one strategy. Now, second strategy called risk acceptance. So I'm accepting the risks and the consequences that comes with it if it's occur. Consequences معناها العواقب أو الآثار المترتبة على وقوع الخطر. So here I'll decide to buy the portable hard disk, despite the facts of the threats that it can go out of my hand and damage, or it is not working properly or whatever. But I decided to go for it. I want to have that risk because I found that the files in my computer, it is important and I cannot delete that much. So let's go for that part and take the risk. Now, the third strategy called risk transference. Transference معناها تحويل المخاطر. So I'll transfer, I will shift the consequences of the risks and responsibility if it's happened. Where I will transfer it or shift it to a third party. Meaning, again, let's go with the portable hard disk example. I decided to buy that hardware device, but I'll do one thing here. I will take a warranty, 1 year maybe, or international warranty for 2-3 years from the buyer, in such a way that anything happened to that hardware, the buyer or the shop or the company who sold it that hardware part to me, they are responsible to fix the damage or to replace it in case something happened. So this strategy, they call it risk transference. Now the fourth one called risk mitigation. Risk mitigation means reducing the effect or the impact of the risk. التخفيف أو التقليل من حدة المخاطر. So in that part, actually, I can also do one thing here to reduce that effect, to reduce that impact by taking care of this portable hard disk, because we know after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years of warranty, what will happen after that? I should take care of the device from the first day I purchase it. So I may spend an extra amount of money to buy cover to that hardware part in order to protect it, and also take care. Don't throw it. Don't damage it. Make sure you treat it very well. So in that way, the risk impact, the risk consequences, I'll try to reduce it as much as possible. In the previous slide, we try to respond to risk by reducing the negative risk and enhancing the positive risks. Here, we'll focus on positive risks only. So there are 4 basic response strategies for positive risk. Number 1, risk exploitation. Risk exploitation means استغلال المخاطر. How can I do it? I can do whatever I can to make sure positive risks happens only. Let's take an example. Assume that our company want to implement a new computer or new computers for a certain school lab. So what can I do to make that event, make that risks positively? I can select one of the top project manager to organize a new coverage of the project. Many people know that top manager, and he has a quite good experience, so he'll try his best to make it successful. So that person can focus on positive risks. Also, we can write a press release, meaning that we can invite certain media, newspaper, journalists for the event in order to make a good publicity, to make a good public relation between us as a company, school, as well as a community, as other people in the society. So here we will try our best to make sure that the positive risks is only happening. That's what they call it, risk exploitation. Now the second one is called risk sharing. Risk sharing by allocating ownership of the risk to another party. Although I'm in the company who is implementing new computers in one of the labs of the school, yet, the project manager could form a partnership with the school principal, school board, or parent-teacher organization to share responsibility for achieving a good public relation for that project. So here, I can share the responsibility of make sure that only positive risk happen, make a good publicity for me as a company, by allowing other parties to help me in that objective. So I will include the school principal, I'll include the school board, and so on. So another party will come together, and their efforts with my efforts will help to share that risk and focus on the positive risk. Number 3, called risk enhancement. Risk enhancement can be happened by changing the size of the opportunity be identified and maximize key drivers of positive risks. How it can happen? We can focus on the public relations of that project, but also we can generate awareness and excitement about it among students, among parents and teachers. So previously we share it. We share it with the school principal, we share it with the school board, and now I want to also make more people, let's say, interfere with us, helping us by enhance the positive risks. How? I can have an awareness program about what our company is doing. I can involve the students, I can involve the parents of the students, so more people will be there, and it will be quite good publicity, public relations between the company and the society. The fourth one, called risk acceptance. Risk acceptance applies to positive risks when project team does not take any action towards risks. So we said in the previous that we can do public relation, we can do publicity, whether we hold it for the company only as the first one mentioned, or to share it, or to enhance it by including many people. Here in the fourth one, they says we will accept the risk as it is, so no need for any extra efforts or public relationship or publicity. Our good work will be a good actually example for our quality, for our reputation, and because teachers will use the lab, students will use the lab, so they will say that the company did well, and they can tell others and so on. So without spending more money or doing extra effort, our good job can be our own publicity. Controlling risk is the last process in project risk management. It involves executing the risk management process and the risk management plan to respond to risks. The expected output of this process include work performance information, change request, update to project management plan, and organizational process assets. Now, by ending this slide, we finish all the related information and knowledge to project risk management. I will upload with the lecture extra questions from your textbook, so kindly go through it, try to solve it, because it will help you to exercise, to review whatever you study and learn from this lecture. Thank you.